Off on our webinar. We are so excited that you have joined us here today for tomorrow's Sustainable Urban Mobility Solutions Start Today, where we will be looking at transformative policies for healthy cities. This is a webinar organized and supported by both Lime, the micromobility company, together with WWF. And we are extremely excited to have a very esteemed panel with us today to envision our future cities and their mobility systems. Just to set the stage briefly, I want to give you a few numbers, and I promise you after these slides, you will have no more because I think we're all a little bit exhausted from some of the slides that were so many different webinars that we have enjoyed, but it's been a lot of virtual time. So just to set the ballpark with some key numbers, why are we looking at cities and why is this such an important topic? Well, 55% of humanity live in cities, and this number is growing. Cities are responsible for between 2 and 3% of land mass, and this is also growing in terms of how we plan our cities. Cities are also responsible for 70% of carbon emissions, 75% of natural resource consumption, and they are instrumental for aligning to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target and the Paris Agreement. So within WWF, which is the organization that I represent, we have a flagship program called the One Planet City Challenge, where we work with cities on doing their data reporting, and then we work to assess to see how closely those cities have aligned with the Paris Agreement. We've taken a lot of inspiration from our friends at C40 on their work on Deadline 2020, and we're very happy to have C40 here with us today, and just to really see and support cities to meet this Paris Agreement target. But as terrible and challenging as the climate crisis has been, we all know that COVID-19 is the reality that we're facing, and perhaps no more than at this very moment. And interestingly, 90% of reported cases of COVID have happened in our cities. So how we move around in cities, how we interact in our cities becomes crucial. With COVID, there are so many challenges, but there's also an opportunity to really envision and think what kind of cities we want to live in. Greener cities, more equitable cities, cities that are more connected, but also smart in terms of social distancing and some of the new norms that we are learning from. So we also have to think about how have cities really been planned, especially in the last 50 to 100 years. Between 40 and 60% of public spaces in cities are dedicated to cars in terms of roads, in terms of parking, in terms of highways. And we have a huge opportunity to rethink this. We've also seen that cities have really risen to the challenge. Cities like Milan or Bogota or New York or Santiago de Chile, where I'm living, had really pushed a priority on better urban mobility and equitable access in terms of cycling. We're going to hear soon from the mayor of Rome about the work of micromobility planning in that fantastic city. So there's lots of things that are happening and happening at scale and speed. We've also seen huge changes in improved air quality, and we're so happy to have the World Health Organization here to really raise this flag that, you know, COVID is a health crisis, but so is air pollution, and how can we really address this issue? And in the meantime, we've seen innovations, streets for people, or better, how can we even think about streets for people and nature if we replan them at the human scale, thinking about nature, thinking about people, and not just cars. So this is where we are today. And my name is Jennifer Lenhart. I will be your moderator. I am the global lead of cities for WWF, and it is a great honor of myself and my organizations to welcome this esteemed panel, including Mayor Virginia Raggi from the city of Rome, Dr. Maria Neira, the Director for Public Health, Environment, and Social Determinants of Health at the World Health Organization, Dr. Lucy Mahoney, Walking and Cycling Network Manager for the City Network C40, as well as Ghassan Haddad, who is the Head of Public Policy and Communications for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Lime. And with this, I will stop sharing my slides because now it's more about the interaction that we will have together. So I have prepared a few questions, and may I also say that this is an interactive space for all of us here today. So kindly, all of those of you who have joined us, please share any questions you may have in the question and answer box. We have an active and busy team that will be answering on the sidelines for you, and we'll pick a few if we have time permitting at the end to bring them on as well. But I'd like to start out, and this is an open question for all of our panelists. In 20 years, if we talk about visions, how do you envision future cities to look like? And what role do you think transportation planning plays, both in the short term and the long term? Now, if anyone wants to jump in on that, feel free to. I won't call you out unless I have to. And feel free to unmute yourself. I think that is in your space.
I'm happy to jump in. First of all, thank you so much for pulling together this panel. An amazing topic, and fantastic to be with you all today. Thank you so much. I think for me, so we know what we need to do to create and enhance sustainable, resilient, and just cities. And because in 20 years' time, we will have learnt from all of the lessons of our past, our cities will be green and they will be equitable, they will be clean and safe, and they will allow for more access to opportunity for all. And I think, you know, for me, there's 3 key steps for the work that I do in C40, and that would include road space that's prioritised for city networks, for walking, cycling and public transport, so that these modes are the first choice for everyday trips for everyone. And by every day, I mean short, medium and longer term trips. We also prioritise and support our essential vehicles, so emergency services or freight and servicing, and any general traffic that remains pays to enter the city at the periphery, and finally that there is wide green infrastructure. Jennifer, your presentation was perfect. We need to have nature-based solutions to ensure that our cities are resilient and care for everyone. We're living in an extreme climate, so we need to make sure that our streets are cool with trees. We need to manage surface runoff because we're facing more flooding events. And we need to prepare for extreme cold by ensuring that our public transport networks, for example, are resilient. And where they fail, there are other viable options to support people. So in essence, cities will be really inclusive, and our communities will be healthy and vibrant and economically agile. And we will continue to reflect on how grateful we are that we have learned and adapted from the pre-COVID era.
I love your vision. That is fantastic. Would anyone else like to jump in on future visions?
Okay, let's is that okay if I go for the public health vision here as representative of the World Health Organization? Okay, this is my vision. In 20 years from now, the society and mayors, C40 and all the associations that we work with, in 20 years, we have for sure learned a lot from the COVID-19 crisis. We all took all the lessons in a positive way, and therefore, our cities in 20 years from now, instead of being so density, I mean, with such a population density as the one they have now, will be less dense and in terms of the population living there. Believe it or not, in 20 years, instead of the cars, the center of the city will be something called citizens and human beings that now they are completely disappeared in the urban scenario. But in 20 years, there will be the king and the queen of the cities. And second, the mayors will be kind of ministers of health. In addition to being mayors, there will be decentralized ministers of health. So there will be accountable in the positive way for the health of the citizens, in the sense that anytime our city is very polluted, they will be aware and then accountable to the citizens of how many cases of asthma or lung cancer we will be responsible for and how many deaths will be occurring every year. But instead of putting it on negative, at the contrary, every mayor at the end of the year will be able to tell back to their citizens, you know, thanks to the mobility, the sustainable mobility we put in place, now we have been able to reduce the mortality in Rome dear mayor from Rome, by 50% compared with last year. And the mental health of our citizens, because now they have less injuries, because they can walk, because they can interact socially, because they have green spaces, mental health has been improved a lot as well. And that is a fantastic news for all of us. So this will be my vision in 20 years, very smart, strategic mayors collaborating enormously with the mental and physical health of the citizens and the happiness, because if you have this type of green spaces and fantastic cities, you will be as well contributing to this type of well-being. And then I'm sure that that will create a kind of healthy competition among mayors, and I will love to see them competing to see and to provide the figures on how many deaths they have been able to reduce, how many asthma attacks they have been able to prevent, and how their citizens are less obese and have less sedentary lifestyle, and therefore they are much better than in other cities. And in addition to promote the beauty of their cities, they will promote as well the healthy and well-being conditions in Rome and Milan or in Madrid, or well, maybe Madrid. We are still there, but it's coming soon. Over.
I love that idea. Decentralized ministers of health and promoters of happiness. It's such a wonderful way to see the critical role of mayors as well. We have several other questions, but if anyone else wants to jump on future visions, feel free, and otherwise we'll keep rolling on. Yes, go ahead.
I'm happy to share some thoughts. I think we're going to play hopefully a small but non-negligible and growing part in this kind of vision. And I think for us, the future is very similar to what both panelists already highlighted. For us, it's really about how can we help put citizens first again. And the way we're thinking about it is, it was great to see your slide on how, you know, cars take up 60% of public space. Absolutely, that is part of our vision, is how can we help people move away from cars and complement public transportation so that the roads can actually be reused for other purposes. We put people first, and we make sure that every modality that's available is actually electrified and shared, so people don't even need to own the modalities of transportation, be it a car or other types of polluting vehicles. I live in Amsterdam, and kind of the vision that Dr. Lucy presented already is slowly becoming a reality in the city, where in the next few years, cars will not be allowed in the center unless they're electrified or of essential services. And personally, I'm very excited about that because it is a dense city. It allows people to reconquer streets that currently are very difficult to go through, or even kind of dangerous with the availability of cars while other people are on bikes. And hopefully I'll get a chance later in this conversation to give you more of a sense of practically what are we doing. But for us, the future is how can we help people move around the city, particularly on short distances, in an electrified manner.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm happy to hear you live in Amsterdam. I spent 5 years in Amsterdam, and every time I hopped on my bicycle, I fell in love with that city again. It is so beautiful. I do have a question, which is not maybe the focus of this webinar, but how to take scooters on all of those cobblestones, but maybe we can save that for a little bit later on.
No, we can answer it pretty quickly now. I mean, Rome is a fantastic city with a lot of historical streets, which also has a lot of cobblestones. And that is a question we get quite often. And over time, we learn, because we started in cities which are not as historical as Rome. And essentially with time, hardware grows to have bigger wheels, better suspension, more safe platforms, in a way to provide citizens with a more comfortable ride and a safe ride, so that they don't, I mean, it is a very uncomfortable ride with different types of modalities, but our scooters that are deployed in Rome are specifically designed with that in mind. And those are the type of vehicles that we would be deploying in more historical medieval cities like Rome, be it Bruges, be it other cities in Europe that have medieval city streets that were designed really for horse carts, not even for cars originally. So I hope that gives you a little bit of sense of what's coming today.
Wonderful. Higher suspension, I like it. Any other thoughts on this question, or shall we move on? I know there's a lot of different stuff to talk about today. Okay, well then we will keep going. And I have, my next question is for Lucy. Now allow me to just read it here for all of you. Many cities have aggressive policies to curb car use and tackle automobile emissions, from car-free zones and congestion charging to limited parking or promoting temporary street closures. From your experience, which policy or package of policies have been most successful to expand sustainable mobility, including cycling and walking? And also, what is missing? And how can we scale these approaches? Everything, basically.
Thanks, Jennifer. And yes, an enormous question. Well, there's been some amazing work going on across the globe with the rollout of many policies that go hand in hand with improving urban spaces, improving public health, economic resilience, improving quality of life. And particularly this year, across 2020, I work with city officials, and I've seen even greater ambition and action to reclaim and transform city streets from car-dominated spaces to people-centered places. So, for example, again, Jennifer, in your earlier presentation, streeteries and parklets popping up in Vancouver, London, Paris, Milan, many cities, and this is where road space and parking spaces are given over to local businesses, restaurants, cafes, so they can expand their business and people can also socially distance at the same time. Another example, which is a little bit tougher to deliver, is where cities are taking action to reallocate road space so that more people can walk, cycle, and take public transport trips. And for example, in North America, the Open Streets program, which is quite similar to London's low traffic neighbourhoods, sees roads restricted to residential only car traffic, but there's no restriction for people walking or cycling. So this means that these streets, and particularly their residential streets, they have better air and noise quality, there's less road danger, they support people to achieve their WHO recommended minimum requirement for daily physical activity, and therefore also benefits mental and emotional well-being too. And one example is Seattle is delivering this through their Stay Healthy Streets program, where over 20 miles of streets will be permanently closed to vehicles. There's hundreds of examples. A couple more. The pedestrianisation of Puerta del Sol in Madrid, London expanding its school streets program, where in September they announced that more than 400 school streets will be funded. And of course, there's the famous Bogota pop-up emergency bike lanes, and Mexico City, I think it's 65 kilometers of permanent segregated lanes. So, you know, then there, of course, is the other end of the scale, and it's road pricing. I'm going to go there. It is becoming more and more of a priority, and it's also becoming more and more of a norm. We need to continue working on the public and political buy-in for road pricing. Talking about scaling these approaches, London's package of road pricing policies is really ambitious and is being scaled over the next few years. For example, the city's low emission zone, ultra low emission zone, is being extended in October. And then 3 weeks ago, Vancouver approved their climate emergency plan. And so the city now also has a mandate to deliver road pricing. But what is missing or lacking is, and I'm sure we're going to cover this a lot, the quality and quantity of public engagement into these measures. And we need to work on authentic engagement and participation, because we need to be able to translate voices into policy, so that people are actually at the center of our decision making. We talk about this time and time again, but we're not getting it right. So I'll stop there. But yes, there's incredible work going on across the globe, and I'm really, really inspired by what I hear and the stories that I hear and share with my cities. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. As a friend of mine often says, evidence of hope. So many wonderful things are happening, and I'm happy that you also shouted out to Seattle. It's another city I've called home, so very great to hear about the Healthy Cities approach. And maybe just to add on to what you're doing, I'm currently located in Santiago de Chile, and tactical urbanism has been a big push here to expand spaces for people, better biking, better walking, better parks and planning, and certainly on that critical element you brought up on the public engagement side of it. Now, without further ado, I'd be very happy to go over to the Mayor of Rome, Mayor Virginia Raggi, who I understand is here with us today. Also, we're competing a bit with a Christmas tree inauguration. So if you have to leave after this, we will totally understand and continue onward. I know it's never an easy job to be a mayor, and certainly not in these challenging times. So thank you so much for joining us. Shall I ask my question for you?
Of course.
Excellent, wonderful, and thank you again. So why do you think it is important for cities to invest in micromobility? What has been your infrastructure policy to encourage its use, including how it connects to other sustainable mobility choices, such as cycling, walking, and public transportation that Lucy spoke about? And could you give us, tell us a little bit more about the impact of micromobility that you've been able to witness in the beautiful city of Rome?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everybody. And thank you for this very interesting issue that we are talking about. Let me tell you, first of all, that, you know, we're still in the pandemic. And so this is, of course, this has been a big crisis for our system, our way of life, our habits. But at the same time, if we flip the card, it can be a great opportunity to increase and make our changing go faster. Because, you know, since I was a mayor, I tried to work about a sustainable mobility plan in Rome. We didn't have a mobility plan, not even a sustainable mobility plan. And this is what we've been doing since my first beginning. And we approved this plan in summer 2019. Without, I mean, after a very consultation and process with citizens. And what came out is that the most of the citizen in Rome wants to live in a livable city. Livable in terms of a quality of life, in terms of pollution, and in terms of mobility. So if we just close our eyes for a moment and we try to imagine what can be a city in the future, I think that every one of us sees in front of the eyes, like people just walking hand in hand in a city without cars, with parks and trees and many pedestrian areas and cycling path and micromobility path. I mean, we don't see car in our future. So this is the way that we are trying to go through. And after the pandemic, if this was just our dream, today this is a project. Many people understand that that is the point that we have to go through and that we have to go to. So we have increasingly see people desire and want to go there. So they are complaining, they are, I mean, they're very happy that we go in that direction. So now what we've been doing is increasing the kilometers of bike lanes. We have a plan up to 2020 to get more than 290 kilometers of bike lanes, more than 60 kilometers of underground and tramways. And now people are happy of that. Before the pandemic, their goal was, where can I park my car? If this city start to increase bike lanes and reduce car spaces and car roads, where can I go with my car? Where can I park it? Now their mind and their habits are changing. So I think this is a very big thing that we achieve with this pandemic, changing our habits and changing our way of thinking about our cities. So this is one thing that I want to share with you. The other thing is that we've seen increasingly the use of the micromobility in this period. I mean, during the pandemic, a lot of companies enter in Rome with sharing mobilities and sharing kick scooters or electric bikes. And now I think I just wrote down some number. I have up to date more than 1.7 million rides done with sharing mobilities, and almost 2,008,000 kilometers have been covered. So people like this kind of mobility. Of course, we're talking about last mile. We cannot cover with sharing and mobility like kick scooter all the city. I mean, to go from the south to the north of Rome, it's about from 40 to 60 kilometers. I mean, you cannot cover that with kick scooter, but you can use it for the last mile. So you can just use a different combination of way, you know, you can go walking, you can use buses or public transportation, then you can use your folding bike or your folding kick scooter, or not but the sharing one that you can find along the street. So people are trying to enter into a new era. And this is what really impressed me the most, because a small thing like a virus start to change our mind. And this is, I guess, the biggest thing that we can use to improve quickly the changing in our cities. Because otherwise, you can have all the regulation in the world, the best regulation in the world, you can have the best laws in the world, but if people are not willing to use it and to help, you won't go further. So in this way, I think that we all gain something that we can change. We're seeing how things can change if every one of us make just a small step, and things can be possible. So I really enjoyed to share this with you, because in a city like Rome, I mean, we have a lot of problems about traffic, seeing people, watching people trying to experiment new things. It's like a sign that everything can happen. So we're like changing from a car-centered city to a different centered city, maybe around people. Maybe people can share their desire. Maybe they can try to use different ways. Maybe they can experiment things. And so we're trying to go step after step. We're trying to go to the future. I mean, this is what we're trying to do.
Wow. I might say, well, organizations, city networks like C40, ICLE, Global Covenant Mayors, and also ourselves when the WWF Cities team, we always say it's so important to work with mayors, but I might add a caveat that it's so important to work with visionary and inspiring and active mayors. So thank you so much for your, I've taken so many notes, but if I could just, add one quote that I love, we don't see cars in our future. That is, a while ago that would have been impossible, but just to continue with what you said, this was a dream. But now with COVID, we are seeing how we can do this in a reality. And we have to work with car drivers, most certainly. They are also our citizens, but how do we create that vision? And I love your emphasis on the willingness of the people and bringing them into the consultation process. Mayor, I know you are so busy, so you are more than welcome to continue with us, but if you do have to go, we 100% understand. In particular, Christmas trees and being out there with the people is so crucial as well. So whenever you have to jump off, we understand, but we really, really appreciate so many of your inspirational thoughts and looking forward to continue working with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, and then the next question. Now we've just heard about some of the inspiring and the spaces for new technology to complement some of the existing efforts and how we're going. So when we talk about new technology and innovations and the role of micromobility, because we've also touched on that quite a few times here. So to Ghassan, maybe I can ask you, what role do you think private operators such as yourselves play to ensure that micromobility and other similar solutions that will come forward become part of a holistic transport solution to shift towards people first cities? You talked about that a little bit in your vision already, but maybe we can continue on that. And of course, what role do different stakeholders play in order that we can kind of collectively join forces towards that critical mass to see this vision of people first cities?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. It was super inspiring what the mayor has shared, and we do see a lot of that in our type of business. I think a couple of things on private operators first. I think private operators, be it transportation or other modalities, have a big role to play in the world post-COVID. I think cities, COVID changed a lot of the dynamics. Operators like ours or others, be it in the bus transportation, be it in ride sharing, as well as micromobility, we all have a role to play here. Going back to what I said earlier on people, cities first. I mean, I on a personal level, have never owned a car, and people used to think I'm crazy for 10 years. But now that I'm in Europe and I live in Amsterdam, I can go very well with my e-bike to a train station, take a train to Paris, don't even need to take an airplane, which is kind of what COVID is putting more as a reality for other people at the moment. And I think when I look at Lime in the last few months, and I think it's a telling story, both as a private operator, but also how we can help put people first in cities. I think first, COVID is a very important thing. We touched on that. COVID was very difficult for companies like ours, be it ours or our peers in the micromobility space. It was a very tough moment. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, or I don't know a nicer way to say it, but it was tough on us, but it was also positive in the sense that people started needing more socially distanced transportation modes. And naturally, micromobility, be it scooters, be it shared bikes, shared e-bikes, or even mopeds or other type of shared small vehicles, became the go-to for people because they could go from point A to point B, be it from their house to work, from their house to groceries, or to another public transportation node, be it a bus stop, a train station, etc., to go about their business. Some cities shut down in Europe during the lockdown, others did not. So that allowed us to really see like patterns and different use cases for our type of modalities. And I think going back to how do we first put people first in cities, I think the cities taking initiatives, the things that you mentioned, the mayor mentioned, Dr. Lucy mentioned, of investments in infrastructure. We've seen a lot of that across Europe, be it in Rome, in Milan, in Berlin, in Paris, with Mayor Hidalgo as well. There were a lot of kind of pop-up bike lanes, either temporary or temporary made permanent. And from our perspective, we were extremely excited to be there for people and allow essential workers, for example, to continue to be able to go to work and to serve cities and to serve the citizens of cities in these difficult times. And for example, just to give you a sense, post-COVID, we were able to see that actually more people were using our type of modalities. We've seen a growth about 70% in usage of our modalities, be it bikes or scooters, in the months following June or after the first phase of lockdown, which was between March and June. It was very difficult. People were locked in Europe, but after that, there was a huge amount of demand for this type of service. A lot of our peers and ourselves included were able to actually turn a business profitable for the first time in our histories, which is great because that allows us to continue to serve cities sustainably. And I think if I may add to that, I think the other things that we're seeing is that with cities that actually invested in more infrastructure versus cities that have not after COVID, cities who have invested in more infrastructures, we've seen an even bigger growth in use of our type of modalities, being scooters or bikes. And I'm sure other players in that industry, private operators who are comparable to us, be rental bike operators, ride sharing, maybe not so much so, but bike sharing operators, everyone has seen this kind of demand increase, and we're very happy to be there to support. I think going back to vision, I think our goal, like I mentioned earlier, is really to be able to provide multiple options that are safe, socially distanced, electrified. It's very important. A big goal for us, going back to air quality, reducing pollution, etc. Something that people have rediscovered. Amsterdam Center was a highly dense area, highly touristic place that now citizens who live there are learning to rediscover. How can we play a role in that? And I think part of our commitment for the future beyond electrification is how can we carbon neutral in the midterm, but how can we also be carbon negative or kind of contribute back to the environment in 2030? That is something that we committed to. This is something that we will work together with all of you to actually make happen in the future, be it all the organizations present here, cities, mayors, and other players that are out there. And I think the last couple of things is intermodality is key, really, we discovered. When we started off just being an electric scooter company, I mean, we started off as being a bike company, bike sharing, then shifted to scooters and now back to electric bikes. We're seeing that actually when you have multimodal transportation options, people start with a scooter, get more confident, start using a bike. That encourages them to start feeling more confident on the street and maybe ditching their own vehicles and maybe thinking about buying an e-bike. And we've seen e-bike sales boom across the world. Bikes being repaired and a lot of cities giving subsidies to citizens to repair their bikes. And that has encouraged kind of a mode shift to cleaner modes of transportation, which is something we completely would like to be part of, completely continue to support. And we've also done a lot of deals with public transit operators. So for example, RATP in France or SNCF in France, and we continue to look at other partners in Germany, in Italy, and other major European countries. And sorry, I talk mostly about Europe because that's the area I cover, but we are looking at these type of partnerships across the world, because as the mayor mentioned earlier, you might not want to take your car, but how can we get you to where you're going? And Lime want to be there for you on the short distances between 5 and 8 kilometers, essentially. How can we get you to Roma Termini, and from Roma Termini taking a train to Milan or to another city? Or how can we take you from Roma Termini to another city where you could spend your weekend? And from there, we want to be there for you to go and start exploring the city in a way that's convenient, cheap, electrified, and hopefully available, like very conveniently in front of your doorstep. And that is our goal. And I think just to wrap up, I talked a little bit about our profitability, and I think that's an important thing because cities look to stable partners. I think financial stability is something that was a bit elusive in this type of industry, be it micromobility in terms of scooters, bikes, or other type of operators. And I think COVID made us learn a lesson, all of us, on how to run our business better, how to be more lean, how to do more with less. But also, it was also quite a seismic shift in people's mindsets. And that allowed these two kind of factors to come in and be able to allow us to continue to be partners with cities and continue to invest in new modalities. So today we're into scooters and electric bikes, but in the future, we already talked about potentially launching a third modality, an electrified third type of mode of transportation, maybe another fourth one that we're working on that will be announced in the future. And I think the last thing I'll conclude on is that Lime being a global operator, our global perspective gives us a unique opportunity to kind of leverage learnings from various cities across the world and bring it to bear in cities in wherever we have kind of visionary mayors and visionary partners, as you mentioned, and really share information, share data on people's usage. Where are the best places to park? How can we make it in a way that's convenient for people, but not also disruptive to cities? We don't want cities to look ugly. We don't want to have more fixed parking spots. How can you give flexibility to individuals to park in a way that makes sense without disturbing, communities that are that could be affected, like disabled people or maybe blind people? That is something that we look at very importantly across the world and bring to bear in any city that we offer our services in. And hopefully what that also means, by having multiple modalities, we're able to tailor our offer to whatever the city needs. And going back to putting people first, by having all these options and working closely with partners like you guys, as well as cities, we're able to truly offer whatever the needs of people and cities are. And that is our vision for the future. And thank you so much for the time. Thank
you. Well, that has been very also inspiring. I'm having a very easy job here as the moderator. And I also love what you said about, the work that Lime is also going to push towards carbon neutral and then negative transportation. We are going to be working with you on setting science-based targets, of which we're very excited about. And I also wanted to comment, I like, Ghassan, that you said that you don't have a car. I don't have a car either here in Santiago. And
Never had a license, even.
wow. Well,
Maybe
I
I
have a
shouldn't be
license.
proud of it, but I am a little bit.
Yeah, you should be, definitely. Well, what's interesting is I've actually had a conversation with some car sharing systems too, and they are also seeing an increase in usership because a lot of people are, especially as they work at home more, or adopting some of the concepts that C40 has pushed, the 15-minute city. They realize I don't need a car in my daily life. Maybe, and here I am sitting so close to the Andes, maybe I want to use it on the weekend, which is very nice, but I don't need it in my daily life. So I think, pushing these ideas is so crucial. And I also love that you are going to, as you said, reveal future options above and beyond the electric scooters and electric bikes. So we will wait to see what those are when they are revealed. Before we head over to Maria, because I have a question very crucial about health and equity concerns. But I know Lucy is very eager to jump in on this. So we'll just hand over to you really quick and then over to you, Maria, afterwards.
Promise I'll be super speedy. Just to kind of focus in on what Ghassan was saying, that e-scooters and other forms of micromobility have definitely helped with the road space reallocation argument. We are seeing a shift from cars to e-scooters, or perhaps just not taking that trip by car and jumping on an e-scooter, which is amazing. But the role of cities is to hold private operators to account, safety standards, climate equity, employment standards, and so making sure that there is that trusted relationship between cities and operators is so vital. And so one kind of big call to action is for Lime and other operators to help cities tackle problems that they're struggling to fix. And one is around data, share it with cities, and so that they can plan future routes for walking, cycling and micromobility, but also have a look at the business model and see if your units could go to areas in the outer parts of the city, not just in the rich or in the central locations, because those areas are also where perhaps public transport isn't as good. So it's my one call is to really see how you can work together to kind of bring benefits to both, just keep up the good work.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the feedback. This is actually a core part of what we would like to do going forward. I think this industry was a very young industry. I think in 2 to 3 years has grown tremendously across the world. And over time, people, made mistakes, people learned. And I think where we are today is truly, particularly in Europe, this is something like I really push my teams on and we would like to focus on, is how to be a responsible actor. Responsible actor across the board. So responsible in our operations, responsible in our relations, and responsible in just how we are as people. And I think what you said is really great. And on the data piece, we already work together with all the cities we operate in, where we share, trip information, we share kind of, we have proprietary information on kind of where's the demand coming from the most, where do we see misparked scooters often, so that we can go to cities and say, hey, by the way, this area might make sense to organize together so that people don't park their scooters or bikes in a way that is disrupting public space. So this is on a micro level, but more macro. I think we're talking about kind of labor practices is something that we're very conscious of, and then what we want to do. I think environmental standards, there were a lot of kind of, in the past, scooters were used that were off the shelf, were not designed for such massive commercial use. So there was a lot of questions about the lifespan of batteries or lifetime of scooters, but the industry holistically and ourselves in particular have advanced significantly there, reducing the carbon emission of our vehicles from production to end of life, and what we do with it in terms of recycling. These are things that are extremely top of mind for us, and there's no way we're going to succeed globally, and in particular in Europe, if we don't put the arguments that you mentioned front and forward, essentially, in the way we do business in the region. So absolutely, and I hope if we meet again in the future that we can kind of come back to you with kind of, hey, this is what we've done since the last time we spoke. So very excited about the feedback and what we're going to do about it in the future. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm seeing some conversations that are happening after this, probably in the new year, once we've all rested and recovered from the crazy that was 2020, and we know why, a huge health crisis, and who better to talk about that than Maria from the World Health Organization. So for you, I have a question about, in particular, air pollution, which, as we know, we've been having some great conversation with some of your colleagues and also the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and really learning and trying to utilize some of the data that's coming out of there. And understanding that air pollution is estimated to claim roughly 7 million lives a year. And we know that vehicular transportation contributes to both climate change and air pollution. So how can we better address human health as well as environmental justice and equity issues, which we've talked a little bit already, within an integrated urban mobility strategy to tackle air pollution, carbon emissions, and access, as Lucy just brought up. So what role do you think policies, planning, as well as communication, and I think, and what role could we at WWF also help to roll out some of those messages? So the role of policy, planning, and communication to really push this health topic when we talk about environmental issues as well, and equity.
Thanks, Jennifer. And this is a very interesting question. And in fact, normally when a question is so complicated, you need to incorporate so many dimensions: equity, justice, health, energy efficiency, mobility. You will have a very difficult response. But in this case, it's just a question of common sense. And in fact, it's all so much linked. I mean, we were talking about the mayor of Virginia was talking about the fact that after COVID, people has changed and has appreciated different things that maybe before that they didn't appreciate it. And that's true. But one of the most important arguments that we cannot forget why a city has to change is not just because, of course, we need to become more sustainable, we have new technologies, we have new demands and all of that, is for a health reason as well. There is an extremely heavy health argument that we need to put on the table. Every year, according to WHO's estimates, there are 7 million premature deaths occurring around the world. I mean, let me repeat that number because I think people doesn't realize that the magnitude of these numbers, 7 million premature deaths, plus, in addition to that, obviously all of those chronic diseases that will poison the life of the people, because those of you who have asthmatic cases around you or long chronic respiratory diseases, or even decrease of our IQ and some neurological disorders that we have evidence now that are associated to exposure to air pollution. In addition to that, we know that, in fact, the fact that a disease like SARS-CoV-2, I mean, an infectious respiratory agent could spread so easily in certain places is certainly related to different factors, and there are many of them contributing, but certainly the fact that you live in a city where you have been exposed to high level of air pollution will not put your lungs on a perfect way to receive yet a new virus, a respiratory virus. I'm sure that it will make you much more susceptible to the disease. And if you get the disease, you will have more probabilities of having a more severe presentation of the disease. Plus, air pollution will create those underlying clinical conditions that will prepare the perfect environment for a virus like the COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, to have a very harmful effect. So this is the health argument that we need to keep in mind, that we are doing this transformation of the cities as well, because we need to respond and protect the health of our citizens. That's why I was saying before that we can even present it in positive and quantify the health benefits that we are generating when we implement a micromobility or a sustainable, innovative system in Rome. And all of these things are fantastic, and we can put all of this together. Now, how we put all the pieces together? Again, if you want a city that will protect and promote the health of the people, you need to have a place where people can walk and have social interaction. This is a must. I mean, if you want to protect mental health, if you want to reduce injuries from traffic, if you want to have a minimum of social life, you need to be able to walk. And to walk, you need to have a pedestrian, you need to have less cars. And for having less cars, you need to have other modalities for mobility. People need to commute. That's another aspect that we cannot forget. Some of us, we do it for pleasure and we live nearby, and then it's easy for us to take a bicycle but a big proportion of people in cities, they need to commute for working purposes. And I remember in Mexico City when they say, okay, the cars are very polluted, so we will ban all of those cars that are older than 10 years old. I mean, this is not an answer, because who has a very old car is not a rich guy. He's normally a very middle or low class person, the one who will have a very old car, but probably they have it because they needed to work, or maybe they are in formal sector. So we need to think on this type of solution. So my call for this type of new mobility, which is great, I cannot agree more, and I partially live in Rome. I'm married with an Italian, so I've been enjoying Rome, the new Rome mobility, but we need to make sure that people perceive it as well as something popular. I mean, we need to kind of clean up this tag of elitist, only those who are environmentalists or organic and vegetarians and can afford all of that. Those are the ones that, you know, and they live in the central Rome, and therefore it's not so complicated to displace yourself. No, we need to provide solutions as well for those who take a tram or needs to take a car. So how do you ensure mobility in the city? That's the critical question. How do you ensure a mobility that will not destroy your lungs? If I had to put a very clear and straightforward, and the answer is it can be done. It can be done for climate change purposes, because when you tackle the causes of climate change, transport is one of them. What contributes, the type of sources of energy we are using. When you are burning fossil fuels, of course, you contribute to climate change, but as well, you contribute to air pollution and the pollution that will go to your lungs. So all of that is so connected that simply having in mind a healthy urban planning will solve all the equations, because then you will have this holistic way of looking at the city, including as far as looking at the equity and having a sensibility for the people who cannot afford to have a bicycle, maybe because they need to take a lot of tools for their work or the cleaning things, because she will move from a house to another to clean houses, and then she has to take some material. So we need to keep in mind those users as well, and making sure that we offer solutions and we are perceived as something popular and for the people, and not just elitist. And at the end of the day, reducing the pollution and the diseases associated with what the bad mobility is now giving us. That will be the final aim. Thank you.
That was wonderful, as always. I always listen and get so inspired by hearing you speak. We have had so many wonderful speakers. We have 5 minutes left. I want to draw attention to our speakers that we have a very good question in the question box if you want to add any comments in there. But I also just want to, before we wrap up, it's important that we also remember to celebrate. And in a few days, we will celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, I believe on the 12th of December, so just around the corner. And that was a huge, huge achievement, despite so many challenges still ahead when it comes to climate change. But to quote Maria, it's complex, but it's common sense. So how can we make sure that the health aspect and the climate change aspect becomes so much common sense? And in addition, since this is also a little bit focused on what's happening in Europe and European cities, we also see the European Green New Deal that's coming up with a focus on 90% reduction of emissions by 2050. So the question, and also kind of a quick wrap up for each of you here, is what role does urban mobility play to help meet our climate targets in the Paris Agreement, as well as the EU Green New Deal? And how can we build on this momentum? We've talked a lot about momentum, and maybe on the momentum side of it, we can also loop into the question in the chat box about COVID, since it's always front and center to everything we're doing right now, and anything else that you've heard in particular with what Maria just said about healthy urban planning. I love that. So Paris Agreement, COVID, and healthy urban planning. Final thoughts. Lucy, how about you go first?
Okay, this is high speed. Urban mobility could play a really big role in meeting climate targets, and the whole avoid, reduce, shift journeys, but also we need to adapt our mobility systems for climate resilience. I think biggest tips would be to rewrite organizations' work from home policies, for example, to help people reduce the need to travel. Business travel policies, as in, can you avoid those trips or can you travel sustainably? Organizations need to help support their employees to make active and sustainable trips part of their everyday mobility. And all of this said, we can build on the current momentum of what's happened all across 2020. And I think for me, number one is to make sure that your vote counts. I work with cities for mayors. Make sure your votes count. Do your homework and vote on who you believe in and who represents your voice in your city the most. And keep talking and storytelling, and make sure that you're informed about best practices and failures across the globe so that we can recognize hard work and we can replicate good work. And with all of that said, I want to quickly mention the C40 Global Mayors COVID-19 Recovery Task Force, which over the summer published the Mayor's Agenda for a green and just recovery. And the agenda outlines steps to deliver equitable and sustainable recovery from the pandemic, focusing on green jobs, investment in public services, giving public space back to people and nature. And you know, if you're, do a stock take, if your mayor is signing up for these types of commitments and taking part in this global conversation, you know that they're going to be doing pretty good stuff. And so, yeah, do your homework, make sure that your city's working for you and that your leaders are working for you. And if they're not, take action.
I love that. Yes, mayors are public servants, so we need to remember that. Maybe over to you, Maria, please, for a few comments, and then we'll wrap up with Lime, which is the co-host of this webinar.
Just so that I think we need to more than ever use all of this knowledge that we have around and all of these interventions and evidence that we have to accelerate and scale up and be a little bit more ambitious on the implementation targets we have, because the times are really difficult and the world needs to recover economically as well. So we need to prove that this is economically feasible and will provide good return on people's economy. That's a very powerful argument as well. And this is a public health officer saying it. So it's normally the public health, we have officers, we have the reputation of proposing things that are very costly and no return. This is the contrary. This time we are proposing interventions that will be good sense or good recovery of the economy, of the society, of the health. So keep that in mind. We have produced in WHO something that is called the Manifesto for a Healthy and Green Recovery, where we propose 6 prescriptions. Using the word prescriptions because we prescribe, as the doctors will do, as I used to do when I was a doctor, after having a diagnosis of the situation, and then we prescribe 6 common sense interventions, making sure that now that many governments and countries are putting a lot of money into stimulus packages for recovering after COVID-19, let's go into the right direction. Have a look at those prescriptions and you will find that prescription number 5 is about urban planning, and all of this is captured there on such a logic, common sense and basic thing that if we move all in this direction and we are a little bit more ambitious and particularly ambition about the speed of this transformation, I think that the health benefits and the economic benefits at the end of this will be massive, and that will mobilize a lot of action in our agenda moving into the right direction. I think the economic arguments needs to be incorporated because the times we are facing are not easy ones, and the economic recession we will be facing, we might be used by certain mayors or local authorities as an excuse for moving into a little bit back instead of at front. So we need to make sure that those stimulus packages are going into the right direction. For instance, they are not used to pay subsidies to fossil fuels, which is still the case in some countries. So let's go for the positive, and the day we will be stopping with this pandemic, at least we will breathe clean air when we take out our masks. Basta with the masks.
I love the idea of breathing clean air in our cities. That is wonderful. And may I say that I've looked at that manifesto and highly recommend it. I'll see if we can add it to the chat box if anyone wants to see it. Impressive work by the WHO. Yes, ambition and economically viable. So over to you, Ghassan. Paris Agreement celebration, EU Green New Deal, COVID, huge challenges and also opportunities. So any final words to wrap us up? And just to note, we have 2 questions in the box. If we can get an answer either from our team in the background or from our speakers, great. But I'm conscious that we're over time. So your concluding remarks, and then we will finish here.
The pressure of concluding remarks. Amazing. Well, first of all, I echo a lot of what was said already. And I think in particular, what I would like to contribute is what we will do in the future to continue the momentum is really echoing what Dr. Lucy said, encouraging people to vote for the right people, encouraging cities to continue to put environment on their agenda. And our job as the private sector is continue to be partners for cities to really kind of push the momentum forward. Subsidies moving away from fossil fuel to more electric transportation is something that's absolutely key to really trigger this electrification and future transition, be it in micromobility, be it in actual just cars, moving from diesel cars to electric cars. That is something that will be big. We need to continue to push. And I think we've already seen that, like cities like Rome, like Paris are already providing citizens with what's called sustainability packages or subsidies for them to be able to buy a new bike, use shared mobility, repair their old bike, and start encouraging people to move with these new modalities. And truly, I think we just need to kind of remove the appeal of the private car that is not used 96% of the time, and really encourage people to feel, empowered to use bikes the same way they do in Amsterdam. It's amazing, really, how much adoption there is and how normal it is for people, even in -5 degrees temperature, to go around with a bike. That is the future that I would like, and that is how we would like to keep pushing the momentum.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, we are 5 minutes over, which is a little bit common practice now, but I think we'll stop there. Just trying to answer the last question in the chat, and maybe also to say, if you want to get in touch with any of us, we are all on Twitter, so we can keep the conversation going forward on that, and really appreciate the time and the interest as well. So thank you to Lucy, to Maria, and to Ghassan, and to certainly the Mayor of Rome, Virginia, for wonderful words. This is a conversation that is just starting. So come with your tough questions. Tell us what we can do better, because this is really, this is the moment when we reset our cities and we start with those visions and turning them into reality. So thank you, and happy holidays, and happy the end of this crazy year, but the opportunity to start afresh, anew in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.